It's our very first episode of Marketing Mentors, the podcast today, and I'm being joined by Jess O'Reilly, who's the AVP of Cloud Sales ASEAN at Salesforce, and she's going to tell us about Digital 360. What is it? Let's find out from Jess. Stay tuned. Jess, welcome to the first episode of Marketing Mentors, the podcast from Aquient. It's fantastic to have you on board for our first episode. We are really excited to be here in the Aquient studio, which is really just our meeting room converted into a podcast studio. But Jess, why don't you give us a little bit of an intro on you, your background, what your role is at Salesforce?
Jimmy, thank you. And the Aquient team, I'm so excited to be here and talk about innovation. The meeting room is definitely doubling up as a fantastic podcast studio. So well done. Who am I? So Jess O'Reilly, I lead a fantastic team across Southeast Asia for Salesforce. We're focused on the Digital 360 proposition, which we'll, I'm sure, unpack at some point through today. And really what we're trying to partner for or solve with customers is the age-old question of how do we get closer to our customers, whether that be in a B2C or a B2B context. And what I love about the partnership with Aquient is we're constantly able to go to customers and or prospects and have this conversation of how do we solve for the age-old, how do we get closer to our customers? Fantastic.
That's a great intro. I think talking about Digital 360 and digital transformation, there's an interesting conundrum in the market at the moment. And it seems like there's been some research that McKinsey's done, Forbes as well, and Genpact, that the majority of digital transformations we can see here are failing at the moment. And it's almost a phenomenon where more than 70% of digital transformations are failing. Are you seeing that in the market? What are your thoughts around why that might be?
Oh, it's a topic I'm very passionate about because I feel it's not the message we want to take to the market because, we all know the digital imperative has become more and more important. I think we all agreed that digital was important a couple of years ago. 5 years ago, it was like, oh yes, we've got to address this digital thing. The pandemic has fast-tracked that like nothing else, where it is pretty much go digital or die. So I don't want that message of digital transformation failing because we want businesses, we want executives to understand the importance of it. But I do think it's important we address it in the right light. The reason why transformation is not happening, there's probably 3, 4 that we would know of at a very macro view that get in the way. First thing is people. We've got to have the right people. You can't just say I'm transforming digitally or here's a digital transformation project without a complete change management process. The brands that I see doing it well gamify it. They create huge, groundswell in the organization about this transformation because it's not just about a small team and a funky office with loads of whiteboards. Yes, that may be how the ideas come about, but transformation has to cut across everyone adopting the new way of working with that transformation. So, you and I have seen it with a couple of the projects we've done where it's even to the point where there's, big signs on the walls, like the, projects going live in this countdown. And, there's gamification around training and upskilling and preparation for that. There's help desks. I've seen genius bars set up in certain companies where, in the launch of this digital transformation, for months or weeks after, come to the help desk and let us, help you understand. And so if you wrap transformation around with a lot of that type of, motion and support, it's definitely going to work. So people is definitely one aspect that I see getting in the way or helping to fast track. The second thing is just actually knowing what you're there to transform. I'd love to get your opinion, but sometimes I walk into organizations and, oh, hey, we've got you here because we want to do a digital transformation project. And then the first thing they say is, oh, these are the 3 technologies we're thinking of. Transformation is obviously enabled through technology, but it's not about the product names or the names on the boxes. It's about the problems or the opportunities you're solving for. So often I find, we've got to be careful as organizations that when we say digital transformation, the full stop isn't there. There's the sentence afterwards that says transforming for what to do what. So I think I'm going on a bit. You can see how passionate I am about the topic. But
it's a really good point. I think one of my observations on it as well is that sometimes it can come across as being highly tactical digital transformation, right? So you get these imperatives from a CEO who says we've got to transform, and we need to transform in 3 months' time, and then we've transformed. And that's over then. And then we go and do something else, right? And there's this highly tactical mentality to it sometimes. And for me, every time you see that leads to failure because digital transformation is not a tactic, it's a strategy, and it's a long-lasting strategy, and it goes for a long period of time. So I think to your point, there's all these things that need to fall into place. It's not just let's go and get a consulting firm in, or let's go and get a set of products in, and all of a sudden we're magically transformed. There's a whole bunch of things that go around that you've alluded to there as well, like people and tools and process.
I think we've been in this long enough, Jimmy, to be able to sniff even walking into a first meeting or a first discussion as to whether a brand genuinely knows what they're like, that genuinely knows digital transformation in the right way. And the two indicators for me is obviously that executive support is critical, and the motion, the budgets and things like that. But it's how they answer the question, what are you transforming for? And, we've seen some of the most amazing transformations come from a problem statement or an opportunity statement. And the transformation rallies around that versus, hey, we need to transform. Oh shit, now we've got to figure out what we're transforming for.
Yeah.
That's not the way it happens, right?
Yeah.
It's the age-old insurance thing. We got to transform because we can't lean on agents anymore. We've got to be able to have a hybrid of agency and digital. We could talk about many examples across industries. But yeah, if they can't answer the what are we transforming for, then I feel it's digital transformation for the sake of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think the other thing to your point on people too is where we see a lot of success and non-failure in digital transformation is the rise of the internal innovator who's not the CEO. So that person who's probably 2 or 3 layers down who really champions and focuses on digital transformation and helps the teams get through it. Those companies tend to succeed a lot more than the ones where the CEO is the one coming in saying, guys, we need to transform. Would you agree with that?
My team probably laughing if they're listening now, because I'm often in huddles where we're talking about a project or an opportunity, and I'll say, who's the change agent? And I'll probably disagree slightly. If the CEO is a forward-thinking change agent, they are probably an amazing catalyst, but they obviously can't hold the reins because they're a CEO. They've got to operate a business. So they need to have someone that can, take that. So, but ultimately what I'm seeing is exactly what you're seeing is if you don't have that change agent, that person that's there to challenge the status quo, to challenge the legacy, there's really no chance that it can be truly transformative. You end up, this is the other thing I think we should mention is here as well, is what you end up doing is starting a digital transformation project, but actually just keeping the same process, but changing the technology.
Yeah.
And that's something I can't stand seeing is, when we're in a workshop solving for, the way we do it today is this. So if you can do it that way, that's great. Well, that's not transformation. And there's actually no value in a project that does that.
Yeah. Got it. So it looks like then, knowing that's the context in the market, that Salesforce has put together, it's not necessarily a set of new products, but a product set called Digital 360. So what is Digital 360? And then Salesforce has Customer 360. What's the difference between the two?
I think this is a great question, Jimmy. And for the record, Salesforce is fantastic at marketing, and you've probably got all these different names, but let me kind of distill it for you because it's critical that we don't get confused by names, but again, we go back to what are we solving for? And people like Salesforce, like our consulting partners in Aquient, are there to figure out what's behind that. But to really kind of bring this to life, Digital 360 is really just shaping a go-to-market conversation. We're trying to make it easier for our prospects and customers to talk to us about what they're seeing in the market today and the change that they need to see. I think, what was once visionary is now mandatory, like you see here. I think we all used to, as I said, say, digital, we need to be there. Now it's we need to be digital or die. And what I'm loving about some of this disruption we're seeing is that isn't just for industries like retail or like banking or like insurance. Every single industry now, with what the pandemic has brought to our day-to-day, is seeing that transformation has to happen digitally. So let me get back to your question. Digital 360s come to life because we want to be able to talk to customers about how they can bring digital to bear so that they can be closer to their customers in a B2C or a B2B frame. Now, for those that are Salesforce, I guess, have interacted with us before, what we're bringing to life there is Marketing Cloud, Commerce Cloud, and our Experience Cloud capabilities. But all you need to think about is this is how we bring selling to a customer, marketing to a customer, together. And I think what we're seeing with this Digital 360 conversation is that we can now be a lot smarter about how we solution for this one big problem. I can't physically interact with the customer all the time anymore. So how do I connect with them in meaningful ways, in safe ways, in respectful ways? You know, we've had this amazing, I guess, flurry of stuff hit the market. We looked at about 18 months, 2 years ago, it was all about trust with data privacy. Then we evolved to this world of being safe through the pandemic, and what does data mean in that? And I think ultimately that's brought to the table the fact that as companies, we need to look at how digital plays in our solution set, in our servicing set, and bringing that to life through technology.
Got it. So it sounds like it's a set of tools, probably some existing, some new, where what we're trying to do is get away from talking about individual products, right? And I think this is potentially why it's been put together in this way, is we say, we're going to solve a problem for you as Salesforce with Digital 360. Don't necessarily think about it like individual products that come in and solve point solutions or point problems. We have a set of tools. You can use some of them or all of them, and they help solve the problem and the challenges that you've got internally. Is that sort of what it's like? I
feel like, Jimmy, you just said what I was trying to say way more eloquently than I did. So yes, you hit the nail on the head.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I mean, it's really interesting in terms of a product set and a set of tools. But how do we approach CMOs or CDOs, or how does Salesforce approach CMOs and CDOs and say, what are we solving here with Digital 360? What is it that Digital 360 actually is solving as a problem?
I like the question because it begs to ask the CMO, well, what are the problems? Or more importantly, what are the opportunities in your business? Because that's where we need to start from, as we've been talking about the whole time, right? What is it that we're looking to achieve? And then working backwards, as you said, from there to figure out what products that actually looks like. But what I'm seeing when we're talking about Digital 360 is the ability to work through that entire customer lifecycle. So being able to come with a CMO and map out, how do we acquire more customers? How do we bring them on board? How do we make sure that we consistently engage with them? And then at the end of that cycle, how do we retain them so that circle consistently, goes around rather than it being linear. So with Digital 360, we're coming in and saying, help us understand what your problem or your opportunity is, and then let's map that out in a way that cultivates that relationship with the customer from start to the circular cycle. And that's something I think that's lost often. Traditionally in marketing, we've always thought about throwing a load of cash to try and acquire customers, or a load of cash to have brand awareness. And yeah, that's interesting, but we talk a lot about humanizing communications now. Through COVID and through what the world's gone through in the last year, personalization is a thing, but it's not about personalization. It's about being personal. And sometimes personalization is not personal. Sometimes personalization is not being human. And so that's a big thing we're talking to CMOs about now, is how do we pivot and use technology to humanize an experience that needs to be delivered digitally?
Let's talk about COVID for a moment, not COVID itself, because hopefully we're seeing the tail end of it very soon. But what COVID's done to a lot of businesses in terms of almost forcing them to bring this digital transformation topic to the fore. And so we're seeing a lot of traditional industries. I've been banging on about this, you've got to be doing digital for 15 years.
Yeah.
And so many companies, it seems like you tried to pull them across the line, right? And they just didn't want to either change or transform because it's hard, it's difficult. And there's probably, there's research like the research we saw from McKinsey saying a lot of these things fail. So you've got a CEO going, we're doing all right. We don't need to do this. And then all of a sudden, COVID-19 hits and you're forced with a screeching halt to come and actually address these issues.
Yeah.
Have you seen that over the course of the last year? Because there's two ways of looking at it, right? One is companies sort of bunkering down and going, let's just do what we do really well.
Yeah.
But the other side of it was a lot of companies couldn't even survive. The stores weren't open if they were traditional retail, for example. Did you see a lot of that happening?
Well, I'd also like to add a third example of that, which is we also saw those that had digitized or transformed early cheering because they were set up for success as well.
Absolutely.
There was kind of those three layers, and I was cheering those people on because, yeah, it really did kind of, to all extremes, exacerbate wherever a customer was. So I feel I saw all of the things that you're talking about. But what I've loved is having conversations about, oh yes, we built that business case a year ago, but it kind of got put to second or third, and now it's the first. It's the absolutely only important thing, and we saw that across the board. So I think it's now topical. What we need to make sure is that it's sustainable and that it's something that we can genuinely make a change in the marketplace around, so that it's not just a fad.
Yeah.
To be honest, and that's where I talk about the pivot that we made with Sonos, well, not just us, but Sonos made in their transformation. You've been over to my house and Jimmy, how obsessed I am with my new Sonos system. This isn't a lie.
The most amazing Sonos setup.
Happened to be in probably what most people were during lockdown, looking for ways to entertain myself, and a new sound system felt like the right way to do that. But just seeing what traditionally would have been a very go into the store, experience it. And Sonos has such a slick retail experience, whether that be directly or through their different, resellers. But the point is it's that VIP experience of listening. Mm. Now, when you take the store away, how do I experience that, and how do I benefit? And so, we worked with them very closely to create this transformation where we could connect, like I said, the acquisition all the way through to the onboarding experience. And even before I purchased the products online, I was already interacting with the app and seeing how, from my phone, I could manage all of the different rooms in my house, the different ways that I wanted to play music, and manage music, and then interact with other, Sonos users as well. It created a whole new digital world that, 3-4 years ago, if I had said to you, hey, I'm interacting with my sound system through a digital app, you'd be like, okay, Jess. It's just the same way, we look at the health industry. We're interacting with our doctors now through an app.
Yeah. It's wild, isn't it?
Just would never have thought about that. So
yeah, and I think it sort of plays to a whole bunch of different industries. Sonos is a great example. They're an innovative company, as it is, but then to take that to the next level of the transformation that's all about online for something that's such a physical experience. Yeah, and I think this is we've seen it as well. We've got a company we're working with that's a traditional clothes retailer, so we'll call them shirts and shoes, right? And that's a traditional mainstay of e-commerce. That industry's been nailed for a long time. E-commerce for companies that do that has been around forever, and it's very mature and sophisticated now. And a lot of companies here in the region we see are very, very smart with how they do that. But then you've got these other industries that haven't transformed that way, and health being one of them, and telemedicine's one of them. Insurance is another. Companies that traditionally have had these channels that have worked really well, and up until and barring the pandemic, worked really well. And all of a sudden, they're now saying, how do we get involved in this? What is, from Salesforce's perspective, what is it that you can provide CMOs in those industries that may think traditional channels are the only thing that they've got? Are there ways for them to transform their business?
It's a really good question. And I think it has to start with starting and experimenting. And I don't want to use the very cliche, failing is better than not trying at all, but it ultimately is what we're facing now. I'm seeing so much amazing prototyping, so much amazing test and error, because digital has that ability to kind of be spun up and spun back if it needs to, or iterated, which I think if you look at retailers, you couldn't open a store and try something without a load of effort and overhead costs. Yeah. Whereas, you can spin up something online and, test and learn with that so much faster without so much overhead and effort as well. So I think the biggest piece of advice I have is start and be bold in starting and test and learn. And from there, ideas and products and services can be born and built from there as well. So
yeah, this is part of it, isn't it? The innovation imperative for a lot of these businesses too, is to say, well, just because we haven't done it traditionally in the past doesn't mean we can't do it now. And things like headless commerce and headless CMS, new technology, I think it's so hot right now. I just posted about this on LinkedIn today. The idea that you've got the back-end power of a commerce platform, but the ability to do whatever you want with the front end. So you're not limited to shirts and shoes, because let's be honest, a lot of e-commerce of the past is designed for catalog-based businesses or product set-based businesses. But what headless is doing is breaking that down. And for those that don't know what that means, it essentially just abstracts what you build on a site or a web experience from the back-end tools. So you can access them through APIs and code your own very simplified way. Our tech director would kill me if that was the explanation I gave to a customer. But essentially just makes things more flexible. And so you now have this opportunity to innovate and say, well, I don't need to be constrained by traditional e-commerce paradigms. I can go and create experiences and use the tools in the back end to deliver that experience without people having to see it in that certain way, right?
I think there's two aspects of this that I want to talk about. The first aspect is what headless provides us in Asia, I think it's game-changing in regards to the flexibility that we can have, particularly for brands that are multi-country or multi-brand. Because if you've got a load of brands in your portfolio, you've then got a load of different customer profiles, right? Some customers of, say, X brand may be an older demographic that don't want to interact in a certain way. So you build a different interaction for them versus, say, another product set, which might be very much a social e-commerce interaction. And so headless is definitely providing that layer of flexibility and scale, as you said, for those kind of multi-dimensional brands as well. So I'm excited to see what experimentation can happen in regards to that. But the other thing I would also say is it's starting to break the barrier. I think there was almost a mental barrier of, if I create a commerce interface, then it must be for thousands and thousands of SKUs, shirts and pants or whatever you were saying before. But we've got a customer in Vietnam who's selling cars and houses online.
Wow.
And when I think about, this is a lucrative business, think about the cost to serve, but also the interaction. I'm in Singapore, I want to invest in Vietnam. How smooth is that if I'm having a closed-like experience online where I can see from all the different angles, I can interact with what the sizing would look like, and there's just the sky's the limit of how fashion retail, for example, is turning digital. Take all those concepts and put it into buying a house or buying a car or whatever it might be. It becomes a really interesting world. So I'm loving what we're seeing in that experimentation. And I think a lot of it's got to do with just forget what you thought was possible and start to challenge that, because there's so many different things that you can explore and ways that you can get your product to market that you couldn't before.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's such an interesting case. I didn't realize that was happening. That's incredible, to buy a house. And particularly when you can't travel to go and see an agent. Yeah. So these industries that they've had to really look at themselves, haven't they? And say, how do we break this down and do this digitally? Yeah. Well, we just haven't been forced to before, and now we have to. Yeah. It's really interesting. One of the challenges around that marketers have seemed to have for a long time, and I'm an ex-marketer, now a consultant, or running a company of consultants. So one of the challenges I had, which it wasn't really addressed very well 5-10 years ago, was the data problem. And so as a marketer, I've always been a very technology-led marketer. So I've always been about, you have to fuse marketing strategy and the traditional marketing approach with technology and data. And if you don't do that, you're not really doing marketing in the 21st century. You're just not. But the challenge that we always had was there's data everywhere, and it tends to be all over the place, right? You've got third-party systems that keep data inside their platform. You've got the IT team that's collecting a lot of data and doing great stuff with it, but hard to access sometimes. You've got marketing teams that are generating data as well. Is Salesforce addressing this data challenge for marketers now? It seems to be, we've got these conversations about DMP, CDP, CRM, and it can get confusing for marketers, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, what they need is data in one place to go and activate and do stuff with it, right? Yeah, I love it. I love it. So many things I want to say to that. First of all, it's exactly the right question, but I think we're trying to answer it in all the wrong ways. And that is by putting acronyms like CDP, DMP, CRM. Because if we could have a room of 5 CMOs here, there would be 5 different definitions of what a CDP is. There would be 6 definitions of what a CRM is. And I think that's, again, without sounding like a broken record,
that's again the encouragement I have is stop solving for the problem with a product solution, or you need to solve for a problem by defining the problem and working backwards from that. And yes, data is going to be critical to all of those problems or opportunities that you want to address, because if we can't create a view of who our customers are and we can't see that holistically, whether that be information about how a customer's interacting with us on digital properties versus in store versus online, like through service interactions, how do we address the 21st century customer? We can't. And so, yes, I think our heritage, if anyone knows Salesforce well enough, knows we've been around for 22 years now. We were born in managing customer data. And I think that's really the difference between a lot of other technologies out there who have solved for different things and have kind of tried to bend the products to suit solving for customer data, because we've been solving that for a long time. And yes, it's evolved. Back in the day, it was quite easy. There wasn't so many data points that we had to collect. And so you'll hear a lot from Salesforce about this concept of the single source of truth, or the customer 360. As I said, we're very good at marketing. We have a lot of good names. But ultimately what that is just bringing that single source of who our customer is, but not just bringing it together. I think, Jimmy, you and I have laughed a few times before. Customers sometimes get so obsessed with consolidating data that they don't think about what they're going to do with it. So all of a sudden you've got a project that's taken 6 months and it's crickets, because, okay, we've got data in one place, but there's no strategy around what to do to do with it. The other thing I would also pull up in the question that you asked is, you said, how do we solve for bringing customer data together for marketers? This isn't solving for marketers. That's again kind of asking the wrong question. We're solving for all the business. Marketing may be the spearhead of that, or the Trojan horse, but the whole business needs to see this as a project. I was doing a podcast or a webinar with one of our mutual friends, Avis from Lux Asia. And, when she talked about the big transformation they did about bringing data together, although she's in the marketing, it was marketing, it was services. She pulled all these cross-functional people together, because what you think as a marketer you need from a data perspective may be different from what the other departments need. And if you're only building one little source that's relevant for your pie of the world, I think you're also missing a trick. And that's what Salesforce is really trying to coach, teach, solve for with customers, is let's think about this as that single source of truth that can not only help the marketer be better, but help the marketer make the service person better and the salesperson better. And holistically as a brand, you strive forward together. Does that answer your question though? Because there's a lot of aspects there.
It's a big question, right? And I think there's probably big answers to the big question. I think it does. And I think the thing that you called out was really interesting to me was that, you can go and get your data together. That's fine. There's probably lots of tools out there that do that. But what are you going to do with the data? And one of the things that we've noticed with consumers, and I think Salesforce has even done research on this through State of Marketing report, is that consumers expect your experience, regardless of the industry you're in, to be the same as the experience they had with not just your competitors in your industry, but any other experience they've had online. So if they have a great insurance experience, they expect that experience to be transferred to retail, to banking.
What a benchmark, hey?
Well, it's
the pressure.
This is the point, right? Absolutely. And I think what traditionally happened is you'd look at your competitors in your industry and you'd say, we're better than those guys. But now what's happening is you've got these unicorn startups coming, and you look in Asia at some of these big companies like Gojek and Grab that are providing single places for a whole bunch of different services, and people just expect that convenience from everybody, right? And I think your point's really valid. If you're not thinking about what you're going to do to activate that data, then why bother having a project that pulls all the data together in the first place if you don't know what you're going to do with the data? Yeah. Because a lot of these companies do know, and that's the thing, right? So when we're talking about digital 360, and we're talking about what Salesforce does, is there a specific set of industries or use cases that Salesforce and Digital 360 is good for? Or is it more broad than that?
I might sound vague with this answer, but it's genuinely true, Jimmy. The sky's the limit. If you have a customer, which every business has to have a customer, there is a purpose or a reason for Digital 360. And I think that answer may have been different a couple of years ago. We would normally say, oh, well, if you've got a lot of, big customer bases, or if you're in the retail industry, etc. But I think we've just been taught such a lesson. Like the innovation we're seeing in industries that we never expected, like the healthcare industry, is really encouraging me that digital is for every business, as I've said. I sound like a broken record, and I don't think that it should be isolated to a certain subset. And I also want to really point out that it shouldn't be just for a B2C perspective.
Okay.
B2B companies are becoming a lot more smarter because we can't rely so much on face-to-face interactions or events. We need to be smart with how we digitally engage. And again, Digital 360 is there to support that type of, strategy.
So that's something that people may not know, because traditionally there's the products that we're talking about, or the tools that are part of Digital 360 have really been consumer focused. But your point is that no, actually there's B2B elements to this now as well. Is that right? I
think we've always probably indexed our focus on the B2C because it was low hanging fruit. But ultimately, again, if you've got customers, regardless of if they're B2C or a B2B customer, they want to be interacted with in a personal, human way. And I think because a lot of B2B traditional companies have had a lot of traditional ways of engaging stripped away, they're starting to think a lot more creatively. I had a long conversation the other day about account-based marketing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think it's an old term, but it's had a revolution in the way it's brought to life, because it's no longer just about, back in the day, the way I saw account-based marketing is how do you know that one individual executive so well that you have this particular book at their desk, when they enter the office, and you're taking them to this exact box seat at this particular sporting match. And although these things might still be relevant, there's such a bigger digital imperative now for that to be digitized, because those people you're selling to are interacting with brands, to your point. They want their B2B interaction to be like they're booking a cab via Gojek or Grab. So, I think we're solving for a lot broader industries, but also a lot broader use cases now as well, which is exciting.
I think it's really exciting. And I think the whole idea that you can break down barriers around, well, B2B marketing was done this way and B2C marketing is done this way. And there's probably an edge of innovation in B2C and not so much B2B because it's been around longer, or whatever those traditional barriers are. Now, as a B2B marketer, you can say, well, it's not just the cool stuff in B2C. I'm going to do cool stuff as well.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make people feel like the experience they're getting from me as a B2B buyer is the same as what you get from, as to your point, an online experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's critical, and there's lots to learn on both sides. But I think one of the markets or the industries we're not addressing here is the B2B2C as well.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really fascinating area because, one, the lines are blurring as to what is really B2B2C now. A lot of these brands that were B2B2C are now going either how do I skip the B in the middle because I want to become closer to my customers, or how do I become so value added or so tight with the B in the middle that this experience of a consumer is just so knitted together. And my favorite example of this is Johnson & Johnson. They have contact lenses under the brand Vision Care. And for them, they're always thinking this B2B2C. We've got eye care professionals that sit in the middle, but we've got Jimmy at the end who wants to receive contact lenses. And so, they were disrupting this industry for a long time. I think we've been working with them for 5 or 6 years now. And their whole concept is, I want to add value to the eye care professional in a B2B context, but I want to add value to the consumer in a B2C context. But that strategy is cohesive and one and the same, not completely different teams on completely different offices, not thinking together. And I love that because it becomes a rapid circle of value add to everyone in that value chain. Yeah. So we need to be thinking about that more to disrupt these types of models, I think.
And I think Luxasia is a great example of that as well, as another customer that does that well, and something that Jess and I have known Avis for a while, but something that they've done really well is capture customer data where traditionally they don't own or have access to customers because they're in the middle. So they go and service retail as a distributor. But what they've done a really good job of is actually saying, no, we're going to insert ourselves into that process. And by the way, retailer, we're going to help you. But we're also going to start engaging customers because we know and understand what they want, and we can look at things across brands and across channels as well, whereas the retailer is stuck at a point of sale generally, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, those sorts of industries now are being transformed massively. If you can insert yourself in and capture customer data and take the experience, J&J being a great example of that.
Yeah, but I think the point that I really want to stress there is it's not about taking the middle out. It's about the consistent value chain across it, because there is definitely validity in most models for that middle eye care professional, as the example of Johnson & Johnson or whatever it might be. So I think we're going to see a load more disruption in that space, which will be fun to watch evolve, I think, and hopefully be a part of as projects.
That's the exciting thing in our industry. There's never a dull moment, is there? It's always changing. So then if someone's thinking about this and hearing this now and saying, okay, it sounds like there's solutions here for a lot of problems, how would someone think about this? You pointed out that there's a number of products in here. You've got Commerce Cloud, Marketing Cloud, Experience Cloud. If someone, a CMO, is out there thinking, how do I get started? Do I think about this as 3 different clouds? Is it one solution, Digital 360? How does it work? How do I put it together?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it goes back to something I've said earlier today was we need to stop thinking about products, and we need to think about the problem or the opportunity that you're trying to solve for. We also need to think about it in the sense of how big or small we want this to be. That's another really big thing. I think, some projects warrant complete transformation where it's ripping something out and putting something in, or in a lot of cases, building something from the floor up because it's a net new business idea or whatever that might be. The digital banks being a great example. Like I was speaking to a bank in Thailand the other day who's probably no secret, but Siam Commercial Bank, evolving to be a food delivery. This is a bank that we're talking to, and we're talking about food delivery and, talking to them about the ability to innovate outside of the legacy of their existing, banking solutions in fast, agile, quick ways is a really interesting dynamic, right? That we're seeing lots of different brands disrupt. So I'm kind of going away from answering your question. Let me answer it directly. I think the most important thing is be clear on what you're trying to achieve. And, consulting firms like Aquient, technology partners like Salesforce, Google, etc. When we're here to be able to solve for that with you, and there has to be trust in that relationship. I know this is probably bias coming from me, but I see the most amazing projects and the most amazing transformations happen only when that trust starts to build, because you're not supposed to, as a brand owner, as a CMO, as a CDO, have all the technical answers, as we aren't going to have all the answers about your industry or your product. So there really has to be a trust exchange when you go to market with going, okay, I know what my opportunity is or my problem is. I'm now going to have a mutual trust relationship that starts to unpack that. That's where I see the best things. The moment I see an email from a net new prospect who's saying, hi, these are the 4 suites of products I'd like to see in this order. I want to see these functionalities. Don't get me wrong. Functional capabilities are important and they need to be assessed, but that needs to be a secondary. The first needs to be defining what is it that we're solving for, and allow some of the people that do it on a day-in-day basis actually share what that solution set could look like. Because as you've said, it's quite complex, right? We've got Marketing Cloud, Commerce Cloud. As part of Commerce, we've got order management, we've got headless, we've got all these mobile options, payment options. Then you go to Marketing Cloud, we've got Datorama for reporting, we've got Interaction Studio for personalization. Already in about a minute there, you've seen that complexity. And, our jobs are there to distill that complexity and figure out where to start. And my best encouragement is, as I said earlier, sometimes it's a big bang, and there are definitely projects where that makes sense. But there are also equally as many projects where starting small and phasing capabilities in are just as important. So does that answer your question?
It does. Look, I think it does in a way, because I think we see this as well. We're a consulting firm and we'll get people coming to us saying, can you show us what Marketing Cloud does? And my answer to that always will be, you probably do need Marketing Cloud, right? If you've got nothing or you've got something that we know isn't as good. But tell me why. Why do you want it? Right. And I think that's the big challenge that we have now with marketers. Instead of talking about product sets, because they've seen it on the internet, because like you said, Salesforce does a great job of its own marketing. And show me a feature set. Let's run down a feature set. Show me what it does. We get a lot of that, and I'm sure you do as well. Vendors, I think, like yourselves, and software companies like yourselves are getting a lot more sophisticated in terms of understanding how to solution for somebody, rather than just saying, here's a set of stuff, here's some features we've built, actually, the thing I really like about working with Salesforce is you get to understand the customer problem. And then we say, out of this Swiss Army tool set of things that we have, these are the ones that probably will fit and solve certain challenges for you.
Yeah.
Let's have that conversation first, right?
Well, I'd almost flip the question and the conversation to, if you have a technology vendor partner that's coming to you and telling you these are the things you need to buy as products, I'd almost question that rather than the other way around, because I would worry that we're solving for selling a box rather than solving for what's in the box. And that's, what we aim to bring to the market as a Salesforce team across the board is, how do we solve for businesses' problems or opportunities in a cohesive way? And then the solution set comes second.
Okay. So if this is all sounding like it's solving a lot of problems for people, right? If someone's listening and thinks this is a conversation I want to have, apart from giving them your phone number, which we won't do because I'm sure you don't scale, how does someone get started?
I think there's a lot of different entry points. The first thing I would say is stop for a second and have an internal, align yourself internally, whether that be in your department with your executives, and make sure you know what the problem is that you want to solve or the opportunity. And that doesn't need to be pages and pages of complex briefing. Sometimes it can just be a statement. And I think that's really important. You got to be clear on what it is you want. And then the second thing is, you want to start with that and build trust, or find the right partners that can come to you with the best ways of unpacking those problems. And a lot of that starts with defining the customer and defining the life cycle stages of that customer. In fact, Jimmy, you could probably answer this question better than I can. I got sent some photos this week of a customer in this office right here with pages of posters and Post-it notes mapping out what their strategy was. So to me, that didn't look like product conversations or feature conversations. It looked like putting the customer at the center and figuring out what that looked like. And because I've been in a few of these workshops in my time, the technology aspect comes second to that. But yeah, maybe you should shed your line on.
Yeah, that's really interesting, right? Because our tech director is famous for this, is customers will come in and sometimes try and solution and say, we need this and we need that. And as a technology director, generally the conversation is around technology, but for them to step back and say, let's not even talk about tech solutions at the moment. Let's talk about what you need to do. So let's talk about defining the problem first. So you'll see in all of that, you're right, there's nothing about products. And those sessions, we have an interesting challenge with those where people say, we don't want that, we don't need that, we know what we want, let's just get ahead and start building things. And I haven't ever had one of those sessions that we do where we say to the customer, whoa, hold your horses here, let's just have this conversation first. And we haven't had one conversation at the end of that where the customers come out and said that wasn't worth the time. So it's a couple of days of investment, but very rarely do customers and companies have the chance to get together internally to talk about these things. And so they say it's a chance for us to go and get different parts of the business together in a room away from the office, emails turned off, the phones are turned off, and we're talking about problems. And for the first time, we've talked about them together. And we're solving them together. And all of a sudden, the mindset of what they came into the room thinking they were going to achieve or build is very different. And so I'd agree with you. I think the experience has got to be, let's spend some time thinking first.
But I also don't want to sound like we're trying to overboil the ocean as well. Transformation has to be fast and agile. So for everyone that's listening, don't feel this has to be 1,000 workshops, 1,000 stakeholders and lots of weeks long. Make it lean, but just make it really thoughtful, I think is the point. Because let's circle back to how this whole conversation started. What was it? 70% of digital transformations fail. That isn't the message I want in our marketplace. No. Because there's so much that needs to be done. And I think it's really just about being the change agent, making sure that you're clearly defined on your opportunity or problem that you're trying to solve, have the right sponsorship, momentum, executive support, have some budget. Doesn't have to be a huge amount, but it has to have some money behind it, and go for it. I think they're the key things I'd love people to take away here. And if this podcast could do anything, it would be one person that's listening who's had those ideas in their head, actually put it to paper and start that momentum. That would be a win for me. And
then I guess what we're saying is be the 30%, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Be the 30%.
Or let's change the 70. I'm not willing to stand for that anymore. I'd like to see that stat changed. I want it to be, that no transformations fail. But yeah, you're right. Let's be the 30%.
Jess, that's great. Look, I think we'll end on something completely different, maybe something a little bit personal. We've been talking about the pandemic and how it's affected the world, but there's a lot of talk now of borders opening up and travel resuming in certain places under certain conditions. What are you most excited about, or what's your first destination?
I never think about it, actually. No, I'm just joking. I think we all think about it too often. I'm torn. The first thing is like, I haven't seen my family in almost 18 months now. So the likely thing is that I'll want to go see family, but I'm trying to challenge that with my family now and start to create expectation that let's meet somewhere in tropical in the middle. So the pandemic lockdown hit, if you recall, I can't remember the exact date, but pretty much a year ago, circuit breaker started in Singapore. And if you remember, I happened to be in South Africa at this exact time. So I cut what was the most beautiful orchestrated 2 weeks in Cape Town, short to 4 days in Cape Town. So I have a lot of that holiday I'd like to go and re-experience.
Wow. Yeah.
And like many, I had my beautiful European summer where I was going to explore Turkey for the first time that I had to cancel last year. So I think there's 3 big decisions. One, how do I see my family while still going back to Cape Town to finish my holiday, or maybe even exploring Turkey? But what about you? I'm eager to hear what yours is.
Well, we're the same, right? I haven't seen the family back home in Australia for a long time, but we've got 2 small kids now. So the challenge is always, wherever you're traveling, there's a challenge, right? And it's not easy.
Yeah.
But we're thinking the same sort of thing. So is it go home, or is it go and take a short break? Because we've been in Singapore now for 18 months effectively. Yeah. And so do we do a quick trip first and get out of the way? And
I know, it's so hard to decide. I think it's just going to be all of the above. I don't think this is a little bit off topic, but I think it's fascinating, is that if you think about the Depression and then what happened after that, it's like the Roaring 20s or something like that. There's a lot of people that I've been speaking to that are in the retail industry that feel there's going to be this really interesting swell as we start to come out of a lot of the restricted environments that we're in, where people are just going to spend because we've been locked away. We haven't been, spending the money that we normally would. So I feel like we're all going to not just go, what should we do? Because we've got this one holiday we can have. We're all going to go, oh my God, we're let out. It's all of the above and it'll be an extreme. So it'll be fun to see how that plays out, I think.
Let's do everything all at once.
Everything all at once, as much as possible, as expensive as possible. So we'll see how it goes. My one thing is I don't think it's happening, right now. So I think we should hold our horses.
We've definitely got a few months to think about it, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we'll change we'll have the answer in a few more months if you come back with us.
Yes, I'd love that. Or maybe we can do this from a beach. That would be better.
Even better. Yeah. Let's plan for that next time. Jess, it's been great to have you on the first episode of Marketing Mentors. Thank you so much for your time.
I feel very honored and looking forward to seeing many more exciting people join over the coming podcasts.
Fantastic. We'll speak to you soon.
Cheers.